back. This is Lauren Kimball for ANI 150, and for this tutorial we are going to bring our axe into Substance Painter so that we can paint the mesh maps. To begin, I'm going to go up here and click File, New, and select the PBR Metallic Roughness template. Under File, I'm going to go ahead and choose that low poly FBX that we kicked out of Maya earlier in the previous tutorial. Under Project Settings, I'm going to go ahead and select the document resolution to be 2K, which will be 2048. And I can pretty much leave everything else alone. I'm not going to check the UDIMs. I don't want any cameras or anything brought in from Maya. Just the 2K and the axe is really what I'm interested in. So I'm going to press OK. And that will bring our axe into both this 3D view and 2D view. Now, I could toggle between the views by pressing either F1, F2, or F3, but that also controls the app that I use to record my screen, so I'm just going to be staying in this viewport. Alright, so on the left-hand side, 3D axe. On the right-hand side, I can see my UVs with the material applied. If I go over here to my right side of my screen, I can see my texture set with the one material that I have applied to my object. And then over here, I've got both my layers and my texture set settings tab. Under the texture set settings tab, I'm going to want to scroll down and I'm going to want to click on the Bake Mesh Maps button underneath Mesh Maps. Now, under here, we find ourselves in the common parameters, which is right here. Under common parameters, I'm going to go ahead and change this to 2K to match my document settings. And then I'm going to go down to the high definition meshes. Click on this button here and select the high poly axe that I smoothed out in Maya. I'm going to go down a little further. I don't need a cage for this. As far as the rays, we're going to leave those alone at their default at this time. Anti-aliasing, we'll just leave it out for the initial bake. Under match, we want to go ahead and do by mesh name. So remember when we were duplicating the low poly mesh and then taking that duplicate and turning it into a high poly mesh by fencing it and then smoothing it, we made sure that every corresponding piece matched the low poly still in naming convention. The difference, of course, being that the suffix was either _low or _high. By doing that, Substance Painter knows to only bake the handle high to the handle low and the axe high and to the axe low. And that way you don't have to explode the mesh to get really nice bake settings. So there's the method to the madness of doing all that naming. Everything else can stay the same. I'm going to go ahead and turn off all the other maps for right now. I only want to focus on the ambient occlusion and the normal map. If those two bake well, pretty much all the other maps are going to bake well. Bake well. So let's go ahead and bake these maps and see how they come out. Alright, yeah, not too bad. Yeah, so there's the nice wrap that we got on the high poly mesh. Loving it. There's a couple of things that kind of stick out to me, but by and large not bad. I think that if I click on B and I take a look at the ambient occlusion map, I think it could handle having some anti-aliasing put in, but by and large I really like how it came out. Let's see, let's look at the normal map. Yeah, not bad at all. Alright, let's go ahead and just rebake these by bumping up the anti-aliasing. Let's just go all out and go 4x4. And even though I don't see any issues per se with the wrap, I think I'm going to go ahead just to be safe and bump up the rear and max difference, or the rear and frontal difference to 0.02. And I'll go ahead and bake out all the remaining maps and click bake. It's kind of cool how you can see all the maps being generated back here. I think I forgot to turn off ID map, unfortunately, because there's no ID map information plugged into the materials, but that's okay. This also might take a hot second just because I have it set to 4x4 and extra rays, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording. Alright, so now the baking is done. If I click on M, I can see all my maps combined into the main material. If I toggle on V, I can see the normal map, the world space normal. ID is gray because I don't really have any ID information to bake out. I could go over here and click X to get rid of it. Ambient occlusion, curvature, position, thickness, everything looks good to go. So in our next tutorial, we'll go ahead and start applying some of those channel maps, so going in and painting like the color, height, roughness, etc.